The grandfather clock in the hallway of Thorne Manor ticked with a slow, deliberate rhythm, each tick echoing the measured pace of Elias Thorne's life. He was a creature of habit, a man whose days unfolded with the predictability of the rising and setting sun. His eccentricity was a well-worn cloak, something the small village of Oakhaven had long accepted, if not entirely understood. His wealth, inherited and meticulously managed, allowed him the solitude he seemed to crave. A solitude punctuated only by the daily ministrations of Mrs. Gable, his loyal and long-serving housekeeper. Every evening, without fail, as the hands of the grandfather clock approached 10, Elias Thorne would retire to his study. A sanctuary lined with leather-bound books and filled with the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco. The study had no windows, a deliberate choice by Thorne, who preferred the enclosed space, a world unto itself. The ritual was always the same. He would enter. The heavy oak door would close with a solid thud, and then the unmistakable clicks of the two antique deadbolts engaging would resonate through the quiet house. Mrs. Gable, who occupied a small suite on the ground floor, had heard this sequence countless times over the past 20 years. It was the nightly lullaby of Thorne Manor. The following morning, the routine was equally precise. At 7 o'clock sharp, Mrs. Gable would ascend the creaking staircase, her key jingling softly in her hand. She would unlock the study door, and Mr. Thorne would be there, invariably seated at his mahogany desk, ready for the breakfast she would serve in the adjacent dining room. He was a man of punctuality, a stickler for order. Lateness was anathema to his meticulously structured existence. But on that particular Tuesday morning, the familiar sequence was broken. The grandfather clock had chimed 7, its resonant notes fading into the stillness of the house. Mrs. Gable, carrying a tray with Mr. Thorne's usual breakfast of toast, boiled eggs, and Earl Grey tea, approached the study door. She inserted her key into the lock and turned it, but the deadbolts remained stubbornly, ominously unmoved. A flicker of unease danced in her chest. Perhaps Mr. Thorne had overslept, an almost unimaginable occurrence. She knocked gently at first, her knuckles rapping softly on the heavy oak. "Mr. Thorne?" she called out, her voice a hesitant murmur. Silence. She knocked again, this time with more urgency. "Mr. Thorne, it's 7 o'clock. Still, only silence answered her. A knot of anxiety began to tighten in her stomach. Mr. Thorne was not one for deviations from his routine. He would never intentionally remain locked in his study past his usual time. A cold premonition began to take root, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her calls grew more insistent, her knocks louder, bordering on frantic. The silence from behind the locked door remained absolute, a heavy, impenetrable barrier. Panic began to bubble beneath the surface of her usually calm demeanor. After several more futile attempts to rouse her employer, a sense of dread washed over her. She knew she had to do something. With trembling hands, she descended the stairs and hurried to the telephone in the hall. Her call to Constable Davies, the local law enforcement for the small village, was filled with a nervous urgency that even his typically placid nature couldn't entirely ignore. Officer Davies arrived a short while later. His sturdy frame and reassuringly skeptical expression, a familiar sight in Oakhaven. He listened patiently to Mrs. Gable's increasingly agitated account, his brow furrowing slightly as she described the unyielding lock and the unnerving silence emanating from the study. He tried the key himself, turning it in the lock with a practiced motion. But like Mrs. Gable, he found the deadbolts firmly engaged. He then placed his shoulder against the heavy oak door and pushed, but it remained stubbornly sealed. The solid resistance spoke of bolts securely fastened from the inside. A low whistle escaped his lips. "That's peculiar," he murmured, his skepticism beginning to erode. He knew Elias Thorne to be a private man, but this level of seclusion, coupled with the unyielding lock, felt distinctly unnatural. Realizing the futility of their efforts, Officer Davies made the difficult decision. "We'll have to force it," he said to Mrs. Gable, his voice now carrying a note of grim determination. He instructed her to stand back, and with a well-aimed kick near the lock, the aged wood splintered with a sharp crack. The door shuddered, but the deadbolts held. He tried again, a more forceful blow, and this time the wood around the lock gave way with a groan, allowing the door to swing inward with a protesting screech. The scene that greeted them was one that would forever be etched in their memories, a tableau of unsettling stillness and silent finality. Elias Thorne was slumped in his high-backed leather armchair, his body angled slightly to the side. His head rested against the worn leather, his silver hair a stark contrast to the dark upholstery. But it was his eyes that held the most disturbing quality. They were wide open, fixed on the ceiling, their gaze vacant and unnervingly intense, as if the last thing he had seen was something that had frozen him in a state of perpetual shock. On the polished mahogany desk in front of him lay a single object, an antique letter opener, its ornate silver handle gleaming dully in the dim light filtering through the forced entry. The tip of the letter opener was stained a dark, viscous crimson. Mr. Thorne was undeniably dead. Officer Davies, despite his years of service, felt a prickle of unease he hadn't experienced before. The air in the room was heavy, still, almost expectant. He approached the body cautiously, his eyes scanning the small, enclosed space. The initial assessment, whispered almost instinctively, was suicide. A solitary man, locked in his windowless study, a sharp instrument at hand. It seemed the most logical, albeit tragic, conclusion. But as Officer Davies began his methodical examination of the room, the seemingly straightforward explanation began to unravel, replaced by a chilling sense of impossibility. The study was precisely as Mrs. Gable had described. Small, square, and utterly sealed. The heavy oak door, now marred by their forced entry, was the only point of access. The two small, high windows, barely larger than ventilation shafts, were latched securely from the inside, their frames encrusted with a thick layer of undisturbed dust and grime that spoke of years without being opened. There was no fireplace, and therefore no chimney. The walls were solid, papered with a faded floral pattern that showed no signs of hidden panels or secret passages. The floorboards, covered by a thick Persian rug, were smooth and unblemished. There was simply no other way in or out of that room. The medical examiner, Dr. Albright, arrived shortly after. His examination confirmed the cause of death, a single, precise stab wound to the chest, piercing the heart. The wound was clean, suggesting a deliberate and forceful thrust. Dr. Albright estimated the time of death to be several hours prior, likely sometime after Mr. Thorne had locked himself in for the night. Officer Davies carefully retrieved the letter opener. The silver handle was smooth and cool to the touch. Aside from the blood stain on the sharp tip, it was remarkably clean. A meticulous examination revealed no fingerprints, neither Mr. Thorne's nor anyone else's. The room itself offered no further clues. The mahogany desk was impeccably organized, with stacks of papers neatly aligned and pens placed in their holders. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no indication that anyone else had been present. The only anomaly was the lifeless figure slumped in the armchair and the bloodied letter opener on the desk. Days bled into weeks, and the investigation, led by a bewildered Officer Davies, yielded nothing but more questions. How could someone have entered a locked room, committed such a deliberate act of violence, and then vanished without a trace, leaving the door bolted securely from the inside? The small community of Oak Haven buzzed with speculation. The rational explanations quickly fell by the wayside, replaced by whispers of the supernatural. Some spoke of vengeful spirits, of unseen entities capable of passing through solid walls. Others theorized about a secret accomplice, a phantom figure who had somehow managed to enter and leave without disturbing the seals of the room. But even the most imaginative theories faltered at the seemingly insurmountable obstacle of the locked door. Could Mr. Thorne have somehow inflicted the wound himself, and then, in his dying moments, managed to re-engage the deadbolts? Dr. Albright deemed this scenario highly improbable. The angle of the stab wound and the depth of penetration suggested a force that Mr. Thorne's state of self-inflicted injury would likely not have possessed. Furthermore, there were no hesitation marks, no superficial wounds that often accompany suicide attempts involving sharp objects. The act appeared swift and decisive, the work of another hand. The police investigation reached a frustrating standstill. Every logical avenue explored led to a dead end. Had there been a malfunction with the lock, allowing someone to enter, and then be re-engaged from the inside? Officer Davies brought in Mr. Hemlock, the village locksmith, man who had maintained the locks of Thorn Manor for decades. Mr. Hemlock meticulously examined the damaged door and the intricate mechanism of the antique deadbolts. His conclusion was unequivocal. The lock was old, but fully functional, and the damage around it clearly indicated that it had been locked from the inside when force was applied to the door from the outside. There was no way, he asserted, for the bolts to have been engaged from the outside without the key. The case of Elias Thorn became an unsettling local legend, a real-life locked-room mystery that defied all rational explanation. The image of the sealed study, the lifeless body with its staring eyes, and the impenetrable enigma of the locked door became a persistent, disturbing presence in the collective consciousness of Oakhaven. The house itself, Thorn Manor, fell into a state of eerie silence. Mrs. Gable, understandably shaken by the events, moved away, unable to bear the constant reminder of the inexplicable tragedy. The property remained vacant, a silent monument to the impossible crime. The windows, dusty and opaque, seemed to stare out at the village with an air of mournful secrecy. Over the years, rumors began to circulate. Some villagers claimed to have seen a faint light flickering in the upper windows of Thorn Manor late at night, even though the electricity had long been disconnected. Others whispered of hearing faint scratching sounds emanating from the sealed study, subtle persistent noise that seemed to suggest an unseen presence within the locked walls. These stories, whether born of fear or genuine experience, only added to the unsettling mystique of the Thorn case. Occasional paranormal investigators, drawn by the notoriety of the unsolved mystery, would visit Oakhaven, eager to unravel the secrets of the locked room. They would pore over the police reports, examine the house, and conduct their own investigations armed with EMF readers and infrared cameras. But none could offer a satisfactory explanation. The room remained stubbornly silent, its secrets locked away as securely as its door had been on that fateful night. The local police files on the Thorn case grew thick with unanswered questions and discarded theories. The impossibility of the crime cast a long shadow, a chilling reminder that sometimes the logical framework of the world could be inexplicably, terrifyingly breached. Decades passed, and the memory of Elias Thorn and his locked room demise faded somewhat in the daily lives of Oakhaven's residents. Yet the story persisted, a cautionary tale whispered on dark nights, a reminder of the unsettling mysteries that can lie hidden beneath the veneer of everyday reality. The house, now overgrown with ivy and shrouded in an air of decay, stood as a silent testament to the enigma. The locked study, with its splintered doorframe, remained untouched, a macabre time capsule preserving the scene of the impossible crime. One particularly stormy autumn evening, a young couple new to Oakhaven and unaware of the house's dark history ventured near Thorn Manor. Drawn by its imposing Gothic architecture, they peered through the grimy windows. As a gust of wind rattled the loose panes, they both swore they heard a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from the upper floor, from the direction of the infamous locked room. They exchanged nervous glances and hurried away, the unsettling sound echoing in their ears. The locked room of Elias Thorn remained a terrifying enigma, a stark reminder that sometimes reality can be far more unsettling and inexplicable than any fictional horror story. The silence of that room held a secret that no one could unlock, a chilling testament to the fact that some doors once closed may never reveal the horrors they contained, and that some mysteries, no matter how diligently pursued, may forever remain locked away in the impenetrable darkness of the unknown. The case served as a persistent, low-humming fear in the back of Oakhaven's collective mind, a constant whisper that the world held secrets far beyond human comprehension. Secrets sometimes sealed behind locked doors with no apparent key.